Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
There were echoes of Theresa May's famous Brexit line, which seemed to work for questions surrounding Keith Vaz too. When asked if he should step down from his position as head of the Home Affairs Select Committee, the PM replied, "What Keith does is for Keith. Any decisions he wishes to make are for him." Keith Vaz, filmed undercover with male prostitutes and splashed over the papers this weekend, has threatened to sue the Tory MP Andrew Bridgen for defamation. But Vaz has done nothing illegal. So is this about wrongdoing or trust, or something as nebulous as public opinion and the rights and wrongs of extramarital sex? Here's Stephen Smith.
The kind of constituency function that makes many politicians' toes curl, a tea dance for example, has never been a problem for Keith Vaz.
How are things with you?
All right, thanks.
That's a very pretty dress.
Yes.
Is it yours?
Yes.
Here he was wooing voters some 30 years ago, just before he was returned to Parliament for Leicester East.
Vaz Keith Anthony, the Labour Party candidate, is elected as the member of Leicester East.
The first Asian MP in the Commons since colonial times.
We fought on the issues of jobs, housing, education and health. So I'm absolutely delighted. How are you?
Keith, a bachelor, lives with his mother Merlin in Leicester. She's a local councillor in his constituency.
I was very late. I got back at 2 o'clock in the morning. Were you awake?
I certainly have had representations from members of the Asian community from every city in Britain, and indeed from many places outside Britain. And I'm conscious of the fact that my work has to also include their aspirations and their desires.
It was such a significant moment. For us Asians, of course, that you weren't destined to be the small, quiet shopkeeper for the whole of your life. But also in terms of the black struggle and power and the story of this nation.
In all the brickbats slung at Keith Vaz, he's never been accused of being a shrinking violet. When a Bollywood star drew 6,000 fans to a signing in Leicester, the local MP was on hand.
All I can say to you, as a former Member of Parliament, is please don't stand in Leicester East.
After Tony Blair entered Downing Street, Vaz, by now a married man, joined the government and became Minister for Europe in 1999. But soon he was dogged by controversy. He was accused of using his influence to help the wealthy Indian Hinduja brothers gain British citizenship. A parliamentary standards watchdog accused him of secrecy over payments by the Hindujas to a business owned by his wife, though he was cleared of benefiting personally. In 2002, Vaz was suspended from the Commons for a month over false allegations against a former senior policewoman, Eileen Eggington. He was found to have given misleading information to the House Standards and Privileges Committee.
I couldn't bear it that so many of his inner circle were, in my view, unwholesome rich Asians, and that sometimes he didn't seem to know the boundaries of public office. But all that, I say, changed in the last decade.
Mr. Brand, I have a final question for you.
It's not quite a variety show, Mr. Brand.
You're providing a little bit of variety, though.
Mr. Brand, you have...
Making it more like Dad's Army.
Mr. Brand...
Keith Vaz reinvented himself as the suave and loquacious chair of the powerful Home Affairs Select Committee. His colleagues have mixed feelings about his tenure.
Too much desire for publicity. It could be said for the committee, but also for himself. And I think to some extent it undermined, and I emphasise to some extent, the credibility of the committee.
But after allegations in a Sunday paper involving Mr. Vaz and male escorts, it's widely expected he'll confirm tomorrow that he's stepping down as chair of the committee, which has been reviewing prostitution laws. Mr. Vaz says he's referring the matter to his lawyers, calling the role of the newspaper deeply troubling. Tonight, the former trailblazer is a figure of ridicule. Though he's been around long enough, he's already read his political obituaries more than once before.
Steve Smith there. Well, let's talk about the ethics of the revelations and the questions of trust with our two Ians, Dale, writer and LBC radio presenter, and Dunt, editor of politics.co.uk. Very nice of you to come in. Right, Dale and Dunt. Ians, I'm going to give the first question to whichever of you can tell me what Keith Vaz has actually done wrong.
Well, he's done something wrong for his wife and for his family, and it is their business, of course, there. That's a pretty significant failing, if it's all true.
So this is about private morality, then, in your head?
Insofar as morality comes into it, it's private. It is a matter for his family. For us, it is absolutely none of our business, and it does not affect his work, either as an MP or as the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee.
I think if he was just a backbench MP, Ian would be right, but he's not just a backbench MP. He is chairman of the Home Affairs Select Committee, and I do think higher standards apply there. Having said that, as an electorate, we always say we want politicians to reflect the society that we live in. 90% of the people watching this programme will have done something in their lives, sexually or not, that they wouldn't like to see on the front page.
90%? That's interesting. I mean, no, is that from a sort of LBC...
better than you do.
I bet that's right. In terms of your phone-ins, you would say that...
I mean, I did a now phone in on this this evening, and I would say sort of 80% of the callers were actually saying, well, this is all really unfair, just let him get on with it, and he shouldn't have to step down. I take a slightly different view in that it's all very well to say, well, he's involved in these inquiries into prostitution and legalisation or decriminalisation of drugs, and he hasn't done anything that's hypocritical. Well, actually, he has, because if you look at the one on prostitution, the whole point of that was to look at whether men should be criminalised for paying for prostitutes.
That's not hypocrisy. That really means that he's a consumer of the thing that he is investigating.
No, but it came out with a different conclusion, that shouldn't happen, and he just happens to be chairman of the committee that decided that. Now, I'm not saying that he necessarily swayed that committee because of his own private interest, but it doesn't matter what I think, it matters what the general public think, and I think
so
if you're in that
position... So it was his position on prostitution that you think is the key thing?
No, it's not just that. If you look at the drugs issue, I mean, you're saying he's done nothing wrong. We don't know whether the allegation that he tried to procure drugs for the escorts is true or not. No doubt that will come out. But if
he suggested that he would pay for drugs that they were getting themselves, which again, he wasn't found in possession, and he also wasn't found trying to get the drugs. So again, he hasn't done anything wrong there.
If on this programme I offered to buy the two of you drugs, I would have Inspector Plod at the door of the studio on the way out, waiting to arrest me on suspicion of procuring drugs.
Why then haven't we got Inspector Plod?
Because he hasn't been found in possession of the drugs, and he hasn't really been found trying to procure them either. And it is still legal to use a sex worker in this country. There are some shadows there about whether they're controlled or not. He has not broken any laws here, but also has to be said, if we're going to start saying that anyone who looks at a subject cannot be a consumer as well, we're about to enter into an extremely twisted political culture. For instance, his previous investigations were on immigration. One could start asking him, well, do you have any cousins? Have you had any siblings who suffered immigration? He is as affected by that as he would be in these cases.
Would you feel that relaxed if it was about a tax haven or an investigation into some kind of tax avoidance scheme when he had...
The distinction there is that it's a financial interest, and that's what we do, where you have to declare in Parliament where you have financial interest.
Only financial that you think shows a conflict of interest?
Because typically in society, that's where corruption is most pervasive and most present. When it comes to personal morality, we do not ask for declarations, and we do it for a very specific reason, which is that it's a very dangerous game to start playing, to start asking people to tell them about their private lives before they come to a judge.
This would be very different 10 years ago, wouldn't it? I mean, something has changed where 90% of your phone is...
I am not looking at this from a position of personal morality. I actually think prostitution should be legalised. I have no problem. If someone wants to pay someone for sex and it's consensual, no problem at all. However, Brooks Newmark, Conservative MP, he was forced to resign because he sent a text of a picture of himself that he shouldn't have done. Now, I'll be saying that is more serious.
Was he forced to resign or did he resign?
He did resign.
Right, OK, but that is a difference. If you say, I'm too embarrassed to face my...
Jeremy Corbyn says this is a private matter. Why then has he suspended Simon Danchuk, the Labour MP, for the sex that he sent? Is that more serious than this?
OK, let's widen this out then. If, in terms of... the question you raised at the beginning, which was, you know, do you put our MPs, do you put our select committee heads in a sort of higher echelon of society? That's not helping anyone, is it? I mean, if we've got a dislocation between the public and our representatives, then
You
surely
can't have
this...
it both ways, can you? You either say all of our politicians should be whiter than white at all times, which is clearly not going to happen, or you say, well, there are some positions in society, some, not all, but some in politics, where if you are caught doing this sort of thing, I'm afraid then it is incumbent on you to fall on your sword.
You know what I think is really dangerous about this? I mean, you take Churchill, right, the classic example. Churchill was a functioning alcoholic. If we want to start holding up this very high moral standard, there's no higher position, right, than the Prime Minister. And yet, if we do that, we would imagine what the tabloids would have done to him.
Like, about likeability or popularity or whatever we heard there, that he was
twitching moral puritanism. That's really the only variable that takes place in these stories. No one cares if someone who eats sugar is on a committee to establish sugar regulation. But when it comes to sex and drugs, because we all sort of suspect that people out there are having much more fun than we are, we're suddenly also terribly fascinated. They probably are, certainly in my case. Then suddenly we're so fascinated.
We've got a whole green room waiting for you. The party starts here. Thank you both very much indeed for coming in.